So we are on
Shimangla,
chapter one of the book, chapter one of Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. We are on page 18 of my book, and we are Shimangla. What page are we in the PDF?
Page 9 of the PDF.
Page 9 of the PDF.
thank you.
Go ahead.
The manuscript predicts, she went on, that once we reach this critical mass, the entire culture will begin to take these coincidental experiences seriously.
Okay, so 1 second. Over here, it's mentioned critical mass. So critical mass is a level which, when you reach that tipping point, it's like the tipping point. It's like the water is filling up in a bucket, and then you come to a tipping point where even one drop extra goes and the water will tip over. So a critical mass in any kind of thing like here is that when a number of people the number of people involved in a particular activity, once it reaches a critical point, then it becomes arm. So if then most people start using it. So the critical mass is what it means here, that the entire culture will begin to take these coincidental experiences seriously. So up to now, only a few people are looking at these coincidences, but once the critical mass is reached, then everyone will start looking at these coincidences. And what are the coincidences? That synchronicity starts to take place. One after the events will start to flow into each other. Spontaneity starts taking place. What we are talking about in awareness all the time, flow, get into the flow, get into the flow. This is what she's talking about, coincidental experiences. So you start noticing the coincidences.
We will wonder in mass what mysterious process underlies human life on this planet. And it will be this question asked at the same time by enough people that will allow the other insights to also come into consciousness. Because, according to the manuscript, when a sufficient number of individuals seriously question what's going on in life, we will begin to find out. The other insights will be revealed one after the other.
So again, when that critical mass is achieved, and many people are asking the same question, that means many people are paying attention to the same thing. And what are the mysteries? What are they paying attention to? What are the mysteries that are making life run as the way that we are running life? Okay, then the other insights will start to come into flow, because more into the fore, money come out, because more people are looking for the insights.
She paused to take a bite of food. And when we grasp the other insights, I asked, then the culture will shift? That's what the priest told me, she said.
So again, as we start understanding what these insights are, as we grow in our knowledge, as we grow in our experiential experiences, that is when the growth actually will start taking place. The culture shift will start taking, or the paradigm shift will start taking place. The way that people are looking at things will start to shift. We can already see this shift happening in the sense that spirituality is becoming in vogue now. People are shifting, they are paying more attention, they are asking the question why. Today, if I'm doing a ritual, then why am I doing it? What is the reason why I'm doing it? A greater understanding of all those processes is starting to come in the forefront.
I looked at her for a moment, contemplating the idea of a critical mass, then said, "You know, all this sounds awfully sophisticated for a manuscript written in 600 BC.
Shivangla, the hissing noises come back.
Now,
Now it's better.
but then today I can't hear you if I don't put the headphone.
Okay, don't worry, I'm going to speak louder.
The priest didn't know. Does his church support the manuscript? I asked. No, she said. He told me that most of the clergy were bitterly trying to suppress the manuscript. That's why he couldn't tell me his name. Apparently, talking about it all was very dangerous for him. Did he say why most church officials were fighting against it? Yes, because it challenges the completeness of their religion.
One second. So there is something missing here. Over here it says, I know. So the manuscript written in 600 BC. I know, she replied. I raised the question myself. But the priest assured me that the scholars who first translated the manuscript were absolutely convinced of its authenticity, mainly because it was written in Aramaic, the same language in which much of the Old Testament was written. Aramaic in South America, how did it get there in 600 BC? The
Oh,
the
sorry, I
priest
missed it.
the priest did not know. Does his church support the manuscript? Okay, I asked. No, she said. He told me that the most of the clergy were bitterly trying to suppress the manuscript. That's why he couldn't tell me his name. Apparently, talking about it was very dangerous for him. So whenever you see, it happened in India also, the Brahman class did not want the secrets to be transmuted to the lower classes. Why? Because they would lose power. So now the what the manuscripts are talking about is, it has the potential to shake the foundation of the church in in that region. So naturally the church doesn't want it to come out, and it is dangerous because the church can get pretty violent. Christianity, the crusades were very, very bitter. They were very violent. They really, they slaughtered a lot of people. They had a lot of wars just in the name of religion. Okay, so that's why it's very dangerous, because they can actually kill to hold their authority.
Religion is doing this all over the world. Yeah,
Absolutely.
not only,
All over the world.
yeah, even now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But this manuscript was 600 BC.
correct.
How was the church involved into this?
No, no. The manuscript आज अपने Vedas were written in 5000 BC.
Hmm.
Okay, but now they are still relevant. So like that manuscript, which was written at the time of the Old Testament, because the language was more or less the same, was written in 600 BC, but they were hidden. They were not coming out. Now, if the manuscript comes out, then it affects the way in which the doctrines of the church were professed. That means if it was written at the same time as the Old Testament, and these manuscripts are saying something totally different than what is there in the New Testament, then automatically there is a distinction which gets created, and then that creates a problem with the doctrines that the church is professing today. So
Okay.
naturally, the church wants to suppress that data.
So Old Testament was also written around 600 BC.
No, 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 no. It was, what they are saying here is that it was written, the manuscript is written in the same language in which the Old Testament was written, which proves its authenticity. That's what they
But
are saying.
how a thing written in 600 BC, it has got to do something with the Christianity.
It is a story, and it has got nothing to do with Christianity. There are different tenets which are there, which over here, what was the first insight was that things will start happening spontaneously. There will
Okay.
be coincidences which will start happening in your life, and you
Hmm.
need to notice the coincidences. That's the first insight. You get that? So it's not related with Christianity in any way. It's an insight, what you need to become aware of. That's all.
Okay. Okay.
Shimangla?
How? I don't know exactly. He didn't discuss it much, but apparently the other insights extend some of the church's traditional ideas in a way that alarms the church elders who think things are fine the way they are.
So again, they want their authority, right? Now, if there is a shift in the consciousness, if there's a shift in the way that people are looking at things, then their authority is going to get compromised. So they are happy with the way things are. So they don't want those documents to come out.
The priest did say, Charlene went on, that he doesn't think the manuscript undermines any of the church's principles. If anything, it clarifies exactly what is meant by these spiritual truths. He felt strongly that the church leaders would see this fact if they would try to see life as a mystery again and then proceed through the other insights.
So again, what is happening? People are stuck with dogmas. No, this is only right. And there is no other truth. So if you're not willing to see anything, if you're not willing to open your eyes to anything, then naturally everything that is even a little different from what you're talking about will start to get compromised and seem as a threat to you. So you'll feel threatened. So with these insights, because the clergy, the senior priests were stuck in their dogmas, they did not want anything new to come out. So this again, for me, whenever anyone says that this is the best way and there is no other way, I mean, forget the best way. They say that this is the way that you need to do something and there is no other way to do it. हमारा तो कान immediately खड़ा हो जाता है, because that means they are totally in a box. They boxed themselves out and they don't have a vision to see where they can expand to. Now that's a huge problem as far as I'm concerned, and that's when I take a break, because the thing becomes that if you're stuck that only this is the way and there's no other way, then I mean you're totally bogged down and you're not open to anything. So then you're stuck. You're stuck in the quicksand and you have no way out of it. So this is the scenario of these priests, the senior priests.
Did he tell you how many insights there were? No, but he did mention the second insight. He told me it is a more correct interpretation of recent history, one that further clarifies the transformation. Did he elaborate on that? No, he didn't have time. He said he had to leave to take care of some business. We agreed to meet back at his house that afternoon, but when I arrived, he wasn't there. I waited 3 hours and he still didn't show up. Finally, I had to leave to catch my flight home.
So again, these manuscripts, because the church is after it, people are being prosecuted. So naturally, something may have happened to that priest, and because of that, he could not keep his appointment.
You mean you weren't able to with him anymore? That is right. I never saw him again. And you never received any confirmation about the manuscript from the government? None. And how long ago did this take place? About a month and a half. For several minutes we ate in silence. Finally, Charlene looked up and asked, "So, what do you think?"
Okay, now this is important. Okay, so for several minutes we ate in silence. So what was it? A penny had been thrown into the pond. Now the ripples were going. So they gave, both of them gave each other time to mull over what was said. So even in meditation, after a instruction is given, the silence is a very important part of the entire process, but it allows the whatever has been said to sink into your system. So that's why he says we ate in silence.
There's a hand up.
That's Raju Mama, he's already asked.
I don't know, I said. Part of me remains skeptical of the idea that human beings could really change. But another part of me was amazed to think that a manuscript which spoke in these terms might actually exist. Did he show you a copy or anything? I asked. No, all I have are my notes. Again, we were silent. You know, she said, I had thought you would be really excited by these ideas.
So again, assumptions. We again read in the four agreements, don't make assumptions. Okay. So she's making an assumption here. And then he answers her.
I looked at her. I guess I need some proof that what this manuscript says is true. She smiled broadly again. What? I asked. That's exactly what I said too. To whom? The priest. Yes. What did he say? He said that experience is the evidence.
So now what does this mean? This is very important statement. Experience is the evidence. So when you get to know about the insights, you need to start becoming aware to experience the insights in your life. And let me tell you, this may be a story that we are reading, but these insights are very, very valid today. And whatever we are doing in awareness, literally everything is covered in these insights. Okay, so again, experience is the evidence. So the moment you start noticing the coincidences, you will have understood what the first insight is all about.
What did he mean by that? He meant that our experience validates what the manuscript says. When we truly reflect on how we feel inside, on how our lives are proceeding at this point in history, we can see that the ideas in the manuscript make sense, that they ring true. She hesitated. Does it make sense to you?
So the moment we start noticing it, we will find that what is being said is true.
I thought for a moment, does it make sense? Is everyone as restless as me? And if so, does our restlessness result from the simple insight, the simple awareness built up for 30 years, and that there is really more to life than we know, more that we can experience? I'm not sure, I finally said. I guess I need some time to think about it.
So what she said was the first insight says that everyone is restless, and then we need to start noticing the coincidences which are taking place in our life.
I walked out to the garden beside the restaurant and stood behind a cedar bench, facing the fountain. To my right, I could see the pulsating lights at the airport and hear the roaring engines of a jet ready for takeoff. What beautiful flowers, Charlene said from behind me. I turned to see her walking toward me along the walkway, admiring the rows of petunias and begonias which bordered the sitting area. She stood beside me and I put my arm around her. Memories flooded my mind. Years ago, when we had both lived in Charlottesville, Virginia, we had spent regular evenings together talking.
Okay,
Most
so
of our
again, so
discussions,
now if you see, she is going into appreciation. So whenever you go into appreciation, we've talked about this many times, you shift from the left side of the grid to the right side of the grid. So whenever you can appreciate something, when you admire beauty, this is exactly the same thing that Zia was also talking about in somatic intelligences. To get empowered, to empower ourselves, we need to connect with something which is beautiful. It is also said in the heart math process also, they say you go into appreciation, go into gratitude, go into love. So where here she's appreciating the flowers, which shifts her. And then of course, yeah, I didn't even remember that Charlottesville is the place, the airport where Monroe Institute is located. So we land in Charlottesville Airport to go to the institute.
most of our discussions were about academic theories and psychological growth. We had both been fascinated by the conversations and by each other. Yet, it struck me how platonic our relationship had always been. I can't tell you, she said, how nice it is to see you again. I know, I replied. Seeing you brings back a lot of memories. I wonder why we didn't stay in touch, she asked. Her question took me back again. I recalled the last time I had seen Charlene. She was telling me goodbye at my car. At the time, I felt full of new ideas and was departing for my hometown to work with severely abused children. I thought I knew how such children could transcend the intense reactions, the obsessive acting out that kept them from going on with their lives. But as time had progressed, my approach had failed. I had to admit my ignorance. How humans might liberate themselves from their past was still an enigma to me.
Okay, so again, every person is different. Every person, everything that you do works differently with different people. So to have one parameter set for everyone becomes very, very difficult. Shivangla, you can speed up reading a bit.
Niketya,
Looking back,
this line I found very interesting. How humans being might liberate themselves from the past was still an enigma. I mean, we've
Exactly.
seen how many generations are actually affecting, which we don't even know.
Correct. Absolutely. The epigenetics and the genetics,
Yeah,
how they are affecting us, the belief systems, how they affect us. That's
yeah,
why I said that every individual is an individual. So one thing doesn't work for everyone. That's why it's an enigma.
enigma. Yeah,
You don't know how it will work.
can I add here that even what Devanshi was talking, that some things are coming down generations,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah,
we are getting,
yeah,
and we don't even know about it, and like we're just going on with it.
yeah, yeah. We have no idea why certain things
Why
are happening
something
in
is
our life.
happening,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Looking back over the previous 6 years, I now felt sure the experience had been worthwhile. Yet I also felt the urge to move on. But to where? To do what? I had thought of Charlene only a few times since she had helped me crystallize my ideas about childhood trauma, and now here she was again, back in my life, and our conversation felt just as exciting as before.
So again, you will find that there'll be certain people in your life who will actually suddenly manifest in your life and put a catalyst for you to change or to really to create transformation in your life. So we must be looking out for these people also. So you could call them gurus, you could call them divine intervention, whatever. But we must be, and then there is a pattern to it. Okay, so, like you have a depleting pattern, you can have an uplifting pattern also. So, the more we engage with our uplifting patterns, the more progressive and enhanced our living will be.
I guess I got totally absorbed in my work, I said. So did I, she replied. At the paper, it was one story after another. I didn't have time to look up. I forgot about everything else. I squeezed her shoulder. You know, Charlene, I had forgotten how well we talked together. Our conversations were easy and spontaneous. Her eyes and smile confirmed my perception. I know, she said. Conversations with you give me so much energy.
So, again, when the frequencies match, when the vibe matches, when we are in alignment with each other, then things seem to flow. This is what, and the entropy is less. So, this is what the revolve also does. It reduces the entropy, it gets people on the same page, and then conversations start to flow. This is what I've seen with the revolve when we start using it.
I was about to make another comment when Charlene stared past me towards the entrance to the restaurant. Her face grew anxious and pale. What's wrong? I asked, turning to look in that direction. Several people were walking towards the parking lot, talking casually, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I turned to face Charlene again. She still appeared alarmed and confused. What was it? I repeated. Over by the first row of cars, did you see that man in the grey shirt? I looked towards the parking lot again. Another group was exiting through the door. What man? I guess he's not there now, she said, straining to see. She looked directly into my eyes when the people at the other tables described the man who stole my briefcase. They said he had thinning hair and a beard and wore a grey shirt. I think I just saw him over there by the cars, watching us. A knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. I told Charlene I would be right back and walked to the parking lot to meet him.
She's gone.
Formed in my stomach. I told Charlene I would be right back and walked to the parking lot to look around, careful not to get too far away. I saw no one who fit the description. When I returned to the bench, Charlene took a step closer to me and said softly, "Do you suppose this person thinks I have a copy of the manuscript? And that's why he took my briefcase? He's trying to get it back?" "I don't know," I said, "but we are going to call the police again and tell them what you saw. I think they also ought to check out the passengers on your flight." We walked inside and called the police, and when they arrived, we informed them of what had occurred. They spent 20 minutes checking each car, then explained that they could invest no more time. They did agree to check all the passengers boarding the plane. Charlene would be on. After the police had left, Charlene and I found ourselves standing alone again by the fountain. "What were we talking about anyway?" she asked. "Before I saw that man?" "We were talking about us," I replied. "Charlene, why did you think to contact me about all this?" She gave me a perplexed look. "When I was in Peru and the priest was telling me about the manuscript, you kept popping into my mind."
So now this is important. In the excursion, we keep talking about, we draw a circle and we draw a line. So consciously, we are aware literally of only 5% of what is happening. The rest is all happening from below the line. So if something spontaneously pops up into our mind, when it is not related to any subject and we've not talked or thought about that thing or about that person, and suddenly it pops up in our mind, then we need to pay attention. So what did Charlene do? Since uh, the author popped up in her mind, or the hero popped up in her mind, she acted on him. She immediately contacted him and set up a meeting with him. Okay, so again, when these things happen, the more we act, the more spontaneous these intuitions and these insights will start to happen for us. And this is in day to day living. Okay, I'm talking from experience, I'm not talking from the perspective of this book.
"Oh, yeah? I didn't think too much about it then," she continued, "but later, after I returned to Virginia, every time I would think of the manuscript, I would think of you. I started to call several times, but I always got distracted. Then I received this assignment in Miami that I'm headed to now and discovered, after I had boarded the plane, that I had a layover here. When I landed, I looked up your number. Your answering machine said to contact you at the lake only in an emergency, but I decided it would be okay to call."
So again, so coincidences, right? She's constantly thinking of him. She gets on a plane which gets a layover. So again, coincidence. And so this is what we need to be aware of, even in our day-to-day life. What are the coincidences which are happening? What is the spontaneity that is happening? And then we need to allow it to lead us to the place that it needs to take us to.
I looked at her for a moment, unsure of what to think. "Of course," I finally replied. "I'm glad you did." Charlene glanced at her watch. "It's getting late. I'd better get back to the airport." "I'll drive you," I said. We drove to the main terminal and walked towards the embarkation area. I watched carefully for anything unusual. When we arrived, the plane was already boarding, and one of the policemen we had met was observing each passenger. When we approached him, he told us that he had observed everyone scheduled to board, and no one fit the description of the thief.
So this was pre 9/11, when in America you could actually go right up to the gate. Even a passenger who was not on the flight could actually go right up to the gate of the boarding gate.
We thanked him, and after he had left, Charlene turned and smiled at me. "I guess I'd better go," she said, reaching out to hug my neck. "Here are my numbers. Let's keep in touch this time." "Listen," I said, "I want you to be careful. If you see anything strange, call the police." "Don't worry about me," she replied. "I'll be fine." For an instant, we looked deeply into each other's eyes. What are you going to do about this manuscript? I asked. I don't know. Listen for news reports about it, I guess. What if it's suppressed? She gave me another of her full smiles. I knew it, she said. You're hooked. I told you you'd love it. What are you going to do? I shrugged. See if I can find out more about it, probably. Good. If you do, let me know. We said goodbye again and she walked away. I watched as she turned once and waved, then disappeared down the boarding corridor. I walked to my truck and drove back to the lake, stopping only for gas. When I arrived, I walked out to the screen porch and sat in one of the rockers. The evening was loud with crickets and tree frogs, and in the distance I could hear a whippoorwill. Across the lake, the moon had sunk lower in the west and sent a ripple line of reflection towards me on the water's surface. The evening had been interesting, but I was still skeptical.
नहीं Vancha, just wait.
The evening had been interesting, but I was still skeptical about the whole idea of a cultural transformation like many people. I had been caught up in the social idealism of the 60s and 70s, and even in the spiritual interests of the 80s. But it was hard to judge what was really happening. What kind of new information could possibly alter the entire human world? It all sounded too idealistic and far fetched. After all, humans had been alive on this planet for a long time. Why would we suddenly gain insight into existence now at this late date? I gazed out at the water for a few more minutes, then turned off the lights and went into the bedroom to read.
So again, in the Gita class also, what Nagarji says is that you listen to something, then you listen to it again. But manan karna bahut jaruri hai. You have to contemplate on it. You have to allow it to mull in your brain, and then you will come to a distinction, or you'll come to an understanding as to what the next step is. So that becomes important. You have to let it linger a little bit in your mind. So he's letting this linger. Okay, the thoughts of this linger in his mind.
The next morning, I awoke suddenly with the dream still fresh in my mind. For a minute or two, I stared at the bedroom ceiling, remembering it fully. I had been making my way through a forest searching for something. The forest was large and exceptionally beautiful.
So now again, he started searching. So the subconscious mind is sending a message: start the search.
In my quest, I found myself in a number of situations in which I felt totally lost and bewildered, unable to decide how to proceed. Incredibly, at each of these moments, a person would appear out of nowhere as though by design to clarify where I needed to go next. I never became aware of the object of my search, but the dream had left me feeling incredibly upbeat and confident.
So again, whenever we are open, the universe will provide the guidance. The universe will give us the way forward. It's very, very important that we be aware and we start becoming over or open to the advice of the universe. We may read left hand of God, Agora also. In that, there's an incident. He says that he flicked a cigarette and it went to a tree and got stuck in a particular thorn bush. And when he saw that incident, so he mentions in that book that I notice these coincidences which take place, these things which happen. They may mean a lot to me because the universe is constantly conversing with me in that way. Okay, so it got stuck. So he knew I had to stay put, or he had to. I don't remember the exact story, but I remember this: that a cigarette went and got stuck in a pin, and then he said something about.
I sat up and noticed a beam of sunlight coming through the windows across the room. It sparkled with suspended dust particles. I walked over and pulled back the curtains. The day was radiant, blue sky, bright sunshine. A stiff breeze gently rocked the trees. The lake would be rippled and glistening this time of day, and the wind chilly against a swimmer's wet skin. I walked outside and dove in. I surfaced and swam out to the middle of the lake, turning on my back to look at the familiar mountains. The lake rested in a deep valley where three mountain ridges converged, a perfect lake site discovered by my grandfather in his youth. It had now been 100 years since he had walked these ridges, a child explorer, a prodigy, growing up in a world that was still wild with cougar and boar, and Creek Indians that lived in primitive cabins up the North Ridge. He had sworn at the time that one day he would live in this perfect valley with its massive old trees and seven springs, and finally he had. Later, to build a lake and a cabin and to take countless walks with a young grandson. I never quite understood my grandfather's fascination with this valley, but I had always tried to preserve the land even when civilization encroached, then surrounded. From the middle of the lake, I could see a particular rock outcropping near the crest of the North Ridge. The day before, in the tradition of my grandfather, I had climbed to that overhang, trying to find some peace in the view and in the smells and in the way the wind whirled in the treetops. And as I had sat up there, surveying the lake and the dense foliage in the valley below, I had slowly felt better, as if the energy and the perspective were dissolving some block in my mind. A few hours later, I had been talking with Charlene and hearing about the manuscript.
So again, as soon as he connected with nature, he cooled his mind down, then the intuition started happening and things started moving. So the more we can be in that equanimity, that equilibrium state of consciousness, that balance within, that is when we are open to getting things. The universe starts connecting with us and things start happening. That's why being in nature is very, very important. Remembering the good times you've had in nature is a very powerful way of creating equanimity and equilibrium within us.
I swam back and pulled myself up on the wooden pier in front of the cabin. I knew all this was too much to believe. I mean, here I was hiding out in these hills, feeling totally disenchanted with my life, when out of the blue, Charlene shows up and explains the cause of my restlessness, quoting some old manuscript that promises the secret of human existence. Yet, I also knew that Charlene's arrival was exactly the sort of coincidence of which the manuscript spoke, one that seemed too unlikely to be a mere chance event. Could this ancient document be correct? Have we been slowly building, in spite of our denial and cynicism, a critical mass of people conscious of these coincidences? Were humans now in a position to understand this phenomenon and thus finally to understand the purpose behind life itself?
So again, most people without trying something, without actually giving something a thought, will reject stuff. But the idea would be to again do manan, to actually allow it, give everything a chance. We reject things, which is something that we need to be aware that we are rejecting things. So he gave this entire process a chance in his own state of being.
What I wondered, would this new understanding be? Would the remaining insights in the manuscript tell us, as the priest had said? I faced a decision. Because of the manuscript, I felt a new direction open in my life, a new point of interest. The question was what to do now. I could remain here or I could find a way to explore further. The issue of danger entered my mind. Who had stolen Charlene's briefcase? Was it someone working to suppress the manuscript? How could I know?
So again, we are moving from the known. So his known space is his cabin, that and his regular life. Now this manuscript is an unknown place. So generally speaking, whenever we are going from the known to the unknown, a slight amount of hesitation and fear definitely creeps in. But all growth, all expansion can only take place from the unknown, because what you know, you already know. So how can you expand in the known? You have to expand using the unknown. So all introspection, investigation, exploration has to be in the unknown. So now he is opening up to the investigation of the unknown. That's why these questions are coming in his mind.
I thought about the possible risk for a long time, but finally my mood of optimism prevailed. I decided not to worry. I would be careful and go slowly. I walked inside and called the travel agency with the largest ad in the yellow pages. The agent with whom I spoke said he could indeed arrange a trip to Peru. In fact, by chance, there was a cancellation I could fill, a flight with reservations already confirmed at a hotel in Lima. I could have the whole package at a discount, he said, if I could leave in 3 hours. 3 hours?
Okay, so now what does this mean? Again, coincidences, right? Charlene came. He he agreed to meet her. He came back. He was mulling over it. He called the travel agent. Cancellation. In 3 hours, he needed to move. So what happens with these coincidences? What I've seen, that you have to move when they happen. If you start thinking about it and mulling over it too much, then the it slips out. So when it happens, you need to act, if you're understanding what I'm saying. So he acted. Okay. The intuition came and he boom, he acted. And this is what I'm finding over and over in my life also. If something comes up, say yes. It's very simple.
The longer now. After a frenzy of packing and a wild ride on the freeway, I arrived at the airport with just enough time to pick up my ticket and board the flight to Peru. As I walked into the plane's tail section and sat down in a window seat, fatigue swept over me. I thought about a nap, but when I stretched out and closed my eyes, found I couldn't relax. I suddenly felt nervous and ambivalent about this trip. Was it crazy to depart with no preparation? Where would I go in Peru? To whom would I talk? The
So again, over
confidence
here, what is happening? Okay, so now the stress is coming into play. So anything that when we are going into the unknown, the slight amount of stress is bound to happen. And that is what we need to transcend to be able to explore that unknown.
The confidence I had experienced at the lake was quickly fading back into skepticism. Both the first insight and the idea of a cultural transformation again seemed fanciful and unrealistic. And as I thought about it, the concept of a second insight seemed just as unlikely. How could a new historical perspective institute our perception of these coincidences and keep them conscious in the public mind?
So again, the point here again becomes that when he had connected with nature, he was on the right side of the grid. And then when he went into skepticism, he came into the left side of the grid and he started feeling depleted. So the idea here is that any manifestation can only take place from the right side of the grid. It cannot take place from the left side of the grid. So the more we pay attention and be consciously aware that we are in the right side of the grid, that is the more better we have everything going on around us.
I stretched out further and took a deep breath. Maybe it would be a useless trip, I concluded. Just a quick run to Peru and back. A waste of money, perhaps, but no real harm done. My plane jerked forward and taxied out to the runway. I closed my eyes and felt a mild dizziness as the big jet reached the critical speed and lifted into a thick cloud cover. When we reached cruising altitude, I finally relaxed and drifted into sleep. 30 or 40 minutes later, a stretch of turbulence woke me up and I decided to go to the restroom. As I made my way through the lounge area, I noticed a tall man with round glasses standing near the window talking to a flight attendant. He glanced at me briefly, then continued speaking. He had dark brown hair and appeared to be about 45 years old. For an instant, I thought I recognized him, but after looking at his features closely, I concluded he was no one I knew. As I walked past, I could hear part of the conversation. Thanks anyway, the man said. I just thought since you travel to Peru so often that perhaps you had heard something about the manuscript. He turned away and walked towards the front of the plane. I was dumbstruck. Was he speaking of the same manuscript? I walked into the restroom and tried to decide what to do. But part of me wanted to forget about it. Probably he was talking about something else, some other book. I returned to my seat and closed my eyes again, content to write off the incident. Glad I didn't have to ask the man what he meant. But as I sat there, I thought about the excitement I had felt at the lake. What if this man actually had information about the manuscript? What might happen then? If I didn't inquire, I would never know. I wavered several more times in my mind, then finally stood up and walked towards the front of the plane, finding him about midway up the aisle. Directly behind him was an empty seat. I walked back and told an attendant I wanted to move, then gathered my things and took the seat. After a few minutes, I tapped him on the shoulder. Excuse me, I said. I heard you mention a manuscript. Were you speaking of the one found in Peru? He looked surprised, then cautious. Yes, I was, he said tentatively. I introduced myself and explained that a friend had been in Peru recently and had informed me of the manuscript's existence. He visibly relaxed and introduced himself as Wayne Dobson, an assistant professor of history from the New York University. As we spoke, I noticed a look of irritation coming from the gentleman sitting next to me. He had leaned back in his seat and was attempting to sleep. Have you seen the manuscript? I asked the professor. Parts of it, he said. Have you? No, but my friend told me about the first insight. The man beside me changed his position. Dobson looked his way. Excuse me, sir. I know we are disturbing you. Would it be too much trouble for you to exchange seats with me? No, the man said. That would be preferable. We all stepped into the aisle, and then I slid back into the window seat, and Dobson sat beside me. Tell me what you heard concerning the first insight, Dobson said. I paused for a moment, trying to sum up in my mind what I understood. I guess the first insight is an awareness of the mysterious occurrences that changes one's life, the feeling that some other process is operating. I felt absurd as I said it. Dobson picked up on my discomfort. What do you think of that insight? He asked. I don't know, I said. It doesn't quite fit with our modern day common sense, does it? Wouldn't you feel better dismissing the whole idea and getting back to thinking about practical matters? I laughed and nodded affirmatively. Well, that's everyone's tendency. Even though we occasionally have the clear insight that something more is going on in life, a habitual way of thinking is to consider such ideas unknowable and then to shrug off the awareness altogether. That's why the second insight is necessary. Once we see the historical background to our awareness, it seems more valid.
So again, the first insight is that certain mysterious occurrences are taking place, coincidences are taking place, some other force is guiding our experience, and there is a general restlessness in society. So the more we start understanding that there is an Aadhar, there is a guiding force which is actually guiding us through this process that we call life, the better off we are. And of course, the second insight is going to build on this experience or this understanding.
I can't hear you at all.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I nodded. Then, as a historian, you think the manuscript's prediction of a global transformation is accurate? Yes. As a historian, yes. But you have to look at history in the correct way. He took a deep breath. Believe me, I say this as one who has spent a lot of years studying and teaching history in the wrong way. I used to focus solely on the technological accomplishments of civilization and the great men who brought about this progress. What's wrong with that approach? Nothing, as far as it goes. But what's really important is the worldview of each historical period, what the people were feeling and thinking. It took
So,
me a long
so
time
again,
to understand that.
feeling and thinking. So our thinking and feeling is what actually drives our society. It drives our consciousness. So if we are not focusing on that, we are only looking at events, then we have no idea as to why an event took place. So naturally, history focuses only on events, not on the feelings and consciousness of people, why they took the decision or why they did something.
Nothing, as far as it goes. But what's really important is the worldview of each historical period, what the people were feeling and thinking. It took me a long time to understand that. History is supposed to provide a knowledge of the longer context within which our lives take place. History is not just the evolution of technology, it is the evolution of thought.
So well said, okay? Because our thinking evolves, and that is where the actual growth takes place, as far as spirituality is concerned, as far as our own internal growth is concerned.
By understanding the reality of the people who came before us, we can see why we look at the world the way we do and what our contribution is towards further progress. We can pinpoint where we come in, so to speak, in the longer development of civilization, and that gives us a sense of where we are going. He paused, then added, the effect of the second insight is to provide exactly this kind of historical perspective, at least from the point of view of Western thought. It places the manuscript's predictions in a longer context that makes them seem not only plausible but inevitable. I asked Dobson how many insights he had seen, and he told me only the first two. He had found them, he said, after a rumor about the manuscript prompted a short trip to Peru 3 weeks ago. Once I arrived in Peru, he continued, I met a couple of people who confirmed the manuscript's existence, yet seemed scared to death to talk much about it. They said the government had gone a little loco and was making physical threats against anyone who had copies or dispersed information.
So again, the church was getting after people attempting to maintain that the information does not pass out. I think we can stop here. It's 3:17. Anyone, anything to say? This is a technically a light book, and it's a story. So I think we will enjoy reading this story. Anyone, anything to say?
So I just wanted to share that in
Yeah,
oneness also,
yeah,
we are constantly spoken about coincidences. In fact, there they presented in a different manner
yeah.
that there are no coincidences in life.
Correct.
All these
Absolutely
things have to happen. So,
correct.
like you're saying, you have to be aware and move on and flow with it. But there are no coincidences.
Right. So
Yeah,
you have to allow the universal
yeah,
consciousness to guide you in the path that you have chosen.
yeah,
When
yeah.
we are in an expanded state of consciousness, we actually choose. That's what we
True.
are experiencing when we are going into the planning center in Focus 27. That we actually, over there, we actually decide what we want to experience in this life.
Yeah.
And then we come down here to experience it. And these coincidences are what are actually bringing us back to the path that we had chosen for ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
Now, whenever we are going out of our path, the universe will always send us a message. But if we ignore it, then it will stop. It will send us once, twice, thrice, and then it will stop. So now you've
Yeah.
missed the bus.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why it becomes very important for us to say yes to what is happening, because it is happening for a reason. There is structure
Yeah.
behind the chaos. This is what the chaos theory is all about. When you look at chaos from the surface, you find everything is scattered and there's no order to the chaos. But when they look deeper, they find there is tremendous order even in the chaos. So that is what life is all about, being able to be aware. Basically, that's the game that we play.
And I would also like to mention, last week you mentioned that movie Yes Man.
Yes,
So I started watching it
you saw
last
it.
night. I saw half of it. It's, I think everybody should watch it. I'm just
Absolutely.
thoroughly enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the next half, the last half will be even more insightful, rather, I should say. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Which one, Mukul?
Yes, man.
Yes, man.
It's
So
on
again,
Yes.
in
Netflix.
that
Okay.
also there is a flip side to it, but the
Yeah.
concept is very clear. See, we can say yes, but I mean say yes a little consciously,
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
that but the concept, it
Yes.
drives home the point
Yeah,
that we are constantly saying no. We
yeah,
are constantly saying I can't, I won't. We are constantly restricting ourselves.
yeah,
We are the people who put lagam on our own heads.
yeah, yeah.
अपने अपना ही लगाम है जब
हाँ,
अपने अपने
because
आप को
this.
खुला छोड़ देते हैं, but
हाँ,
with conscious awareness. I'm not saying
yes.
go and do drugs and do all sorts
Yeah,
of
yeah.
ulta pulta things, but
हाँ.
when something shows up, be gentle with it and say yes, now let's see what happens. ज्यादा से ज्यादा क्या होगा? So go and do, attempt, and that's when you'll find that things start moving and churning.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else?
Okay.
Anything? Thank you, Mukul Bhavi, for sharing that.
No, no, thank you.
Okay, so we are meeting for meditation at 3:45, and today
Thank you,
we
Bhaiya.
have the 9:15 talk also. Okay, Andrew Austin is coming. Metaphor of movement. I think some of the people in awareness have actually gone through. I mean, haven't had an introduction to it. It's a very nice process. It's something that we can actually use in our lives. So hopefully it will be a very interesting talk. So thank you everyone. See you.
Thank you. Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you,
Ram Ram.
Shimangla.
Ram Ram
Thank
ji.
you.
Ram Ram.
Thank you.